development in general, just to speed up our performance and make sure that we get as efficient as possible. So just the first tip that I'm going to show is a super basic one, but an incredibly powerful one, which I would encourage everyone to use. It's the use of Control and O, which opens up the Open From environment and allows you to search for any module, and it's quite efficient in searching, and you can search for any module and just open it right up from there. So I don't know about you guys, but I think jumping into the tile where we can see all the applications can get super slow and super cumbersome, and actually drilling into it is quite inefficient and looking for our modules. So jumping straight into Control O and allowing us just to search for the modules is super powerful, super efficient. So yeah, highly recommend it. Then the second one that I got here is to search in other modules. So oftentimes we might be looking for a certain entity or a certain action, or I must say a public entity or public action. And usually we would try to drill into that module and try to look for it, go into the dependency tabs and see where we can find it. But a really easy way to do this is just to use the search functionality in the top right-hand corner and just go search in other modules. And you can search for anything public that is available. So if, let's say, I would like to search for my AIDT table, then I can see that over here, and then you can actually go ahead and add it in as a dependency into your project and use it straight away. And I think it actually zooms you straight into that entity that you just added in. So super easy, super helpful tips just to kind of speed up your development within within Service Studio. All right, so those are just two practical ones within Service Studio itself. Then I want to talk a bit about the concept of rubber ducking. I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever heard this concept. So there's actually a website for this, would you believe it? So rubber ducking is essentially a technique that you can use for debugging. So oftentimes, if you're dealing with a complicated problem within your code, or a complicated problem that you need to solve, you can sort of get stuck in your own mind and run around in an echo chamber, which gets real stale real quick. So one tip is to not be stuck in that, not be stuck by yourself trying to figure this thing out, but rather call one of your other developers if you're working in a team, or your tech lead, or anyone else who sort of understands what you're trying to build, and run it by them, bounce it off them. Oftentimes we can find we can find a solution for whatever problem just by restating our problem out loud to anyone who would listen. And if you can't find anyone to listen to you, this website's actually pretty cool, where it has a built-in rubber duck that you can talk to. So you can talk to a duck. Oh, by the way, I didn't say where rubber ducking comes from. So rubber ducking comes from the concept of having some inanimate object on your desk that you can actually talk to and audibly speak out your problem to this inanimate object. And just by speaking it out, you find whatever issue it is. A solution to your problem. So obviously this is a lot better if you have another human speaking back to you, but you have the cyber duck that you can use and ask them questions. So just say hi, and then it doesn't fully understand. So now it's asking me just to describe what my bug is, and I'll just ask silly questions around that. Like, I've never used this. I don't know if it'll be very useful, but just kind of illustrates the point. Yeah, so that's rubber ducking. Really good for problem solving and debugging. And then on the topic of debugging, I also want to just speak a bit about the use of service actions for test screens. So what we need, so oftentimes when we're building a solution, we need to test it out, or test out whatever we are building, and often data can be a real problem to generate our test application. data can be a real problem to test whatever piece of code we are trying to develop. So a real handy trick that actually came in super useful for me just this last week is to use service actions. So I have two modules here. So I have the CS, which stands for my core services, and then I just have a basic test application here. So what I've done is I've built the core of my logic just as I would in any of my actions over here. So I have this is for a rate calculation engine. So this is just something that takes in rates and spits out a price. So we generate the code just as we usually would, but then I just create a wrapper around that. So you can see that I have my test wrappers over here. I call my action, and I use a series, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but a series of site properties to run it in test and to set the particular charge date times and start date times to override whatever is in the database. So I use these site properties to reroute my process flow to override some values, and then I wrap all of this into a service action. Now, why a service action? The reason is, if we jump into the test application, so here I have the ability to generate some test data, and I have the ability to set some whatever values I need, because oftentimes data that you need to generate could be reliant or a product of time. So for example, if we need to calculate something over several months, we can't wait for several months into the future before we can actually test this product in QA. So what we then need to do is we need to find a way to create that data artificially. So this gives us the ability to overwrite whatever we have in the database and generate into the future. And when I run this, when I click the, I was waiting for this to load. Sorry, guys, seems like I have some internet problems here. So when I click to run this action, then I fire off the service action that I created in the previous module. Now, one thing we all know about service actions, which we've read on which hopefully we've gotten from the training forums on the OutSystems community, is that service actions are loosely coupled between modules. So what that means is, if I change the guts of anything within the service action, if I change anything other than the inputs and the outputs, I do not need to refresh dependencies within the parent module that's calling that service action. So that's hugely beneficial, especially if we have a massive cascading dependencies between modules, because as soon as we find a problem, we can just jump into our service, we can just jump back into our core module, change whatever we need to change, publish a single module, and that should roll straight up into the calling application, which allows us to make super quick changes to any problems we might find in our code. Just last thing on that, if we debug in service actions, it's always important to select your entry module as this module. Now, usually what we used to when we debug, you have to specify the actual entry point where you're calling this application from, which traditionally we would say, for service actions, we would say, I'm coming in from the SiteIQ test application. So then the debugger will know, okay, anything coming in from the SiteIQ test application, I need to catch in the debugger. But it won't work for service actions, because service actions are actually just REST APIs that the parent module are calling. So we need to specify that it's coming from this module, because for all intents and purposes, it is like we're calling it within this module over here. So that's what I had to share with you guys. And yeah, look forward to catching up with group 4 in the sessions later. Thank you very much.